All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. And today we are tackling Thanksgiving.
Ooh, Thanksgiving, a holiday near and dear to many people's hearts.
It is, and I think a lot of times we think we know the story of Thanksgiving, you know?
The
Yeah,
basics.
we kind of got to, but we're going to go beyond the basics here today.
So much more to it than meets the eye.
Exactly. And to help us uncover all the stuff, we've got a great article here from history.com about Thanksgiving in 2024.
Excellent source.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the first things that it dives into is, that traditional Thanksgiving story, the one we all learned in school.
Right, Pilgrims, Mayflower, 1621.
Exactly. But the article kind of challenges us to think maybe that's not the whole story.
Well, it's not inaccurate.
Right.
It's just a very simplified version of a much more nuanced and challenging history.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's unpack that Plymouth story,
Yeah.
what actually went down.
Well, the basic facts are that a group of pilgrims, after arriving on the Mayflower in 1620, did indeed share a harvest feast with the Wampanoag tribe a year later. And we even have a first-hand account from Edward Winslow, who is one of the pilgrims, and he describes the feast they had wildfowl and deer, but notably no pies or cakes.
No dessert. I don't know if I can handle a Thanksgiving without dessert.
Right.
So, I mean, that happened. We know that, but you're saying there's more to it.
Right. Well, framing this event as the first Thanksgiving, it kind of ignores the complex relationship between the colonists and the indigenous people.
Yeah.
And, the arrival of Europeans in North America led to, conflict, disease, and displacement for Native Americans.
Right.
And that's why many Native Americans and their allies observe a national day of mourning on Thanksgiving, which is sort of a somber counterpoint to that celebratory narrative.
Yeah, that's really important to remember, too, because it's not a happy holiday for everyone, and we need to be, sensitive to that.
Definitely.
But, even going beyond that, the idea of Plymouth as the origin point is being challenged as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Several other locations actually lay claim to having these Thanksgiving-like celebrations even earlier.
Really?
So, for example, Florida points to a 1565 feast between Spanish settlers and the Tnuquah tribe.
Wow.
This is over 50 years before the Plymouth event.
So Thanksgiving before the Pilgrims even got here. That's wild.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you think about the way we frame this holiday.
Totally.
It suggests that maybe the idea of giving thanks for a bountiful harvest was, kind of a universal human impulse,
Right.
something that was expressed in different ways across cultures throughout time.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
But, we've got these various claims to the first Thanksgiving. But how did the holiday as we know it, the national celebration, come to be?
Well, it's a journey.
I bet.
We do have early presidential proclamations like those issued by George Washington. But even then, the idea of a national Thanksgiving was controversial.
Oh, really?
Yes, Thomas
Yeah.
Jefferson, for instance, opposed it on the grounds that he thought it violated the separation of church and state.
So a founding father against giving thanks. What was his thinking there?
Well, Jefferson believed that government involvement in religious matters was, a dangerous precedent.
Right.
And he felt a national Thanksgiving with its inherent religious connotations would blur those lines.
Okay, so it wasn't that he didn't want to give thanks. He just had a different, philosophical approach.
Right. He did actually issue Thanksgiving proclamations when he was governor of Virginia.
Oh, interesting.
But as president, he felt it was overstepping the bounds of federal power.
Okay, so clearly somebody came along who really championed the cause. I mean, Thanksgiving is a national holiday.
That would be Sarah Josepha Hale, often referred to as the mother of Thanksgiving.
I've heard that name.
She campaigned for a national Thanksgiving holiday for 36 years.
Wow.
She wrote countless letters and editorials lobbying presidents directly.
Talk about dedication.
Oh, she was determined.
So she was the one who finally got it over the finish line.
He played a key role for sure.
Okay.
In 1863, in the midst of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln issued a proclamation establishing a national Thanksgiving Day on the last Thursday in November.
Right in the middle of the Civil War. That's really interesting timing.
It was a deliberate move on Lincoln's part.
Yeah.
His proclamation wasn't just about celebrating a bountiful harvest. It was also an attempt to foster unity and healing in a nation that was deeply divided by the war.
Okay, I can see that.
He saw Thanksgiving as a way to remind Americans of their shared values and common humanity, even amidst this unimaginable conflict.
Yeah, even today, Thanksgiving is a time when families try to, put aside their differences.
Right, exactly.
Come together.
A shared meal, even in the darkest of times, can be really powerful.
Yeah. So Thanksgiving, this fixed point on the calendar, but I remember reading about a president trying to change the date.
Oh, yes, you're talking about President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Franksgiving debacle.
That's the one. It sounds kind of disastrous.
It didn't go well.
What happened?
Well, in 1939, hoping to boost Depression-era retail sales, he moved Thanksgiving a week earlier.
Oh, he was trying to extend the shopping season.
Exactly, but the public reaction was swift and fierce.
Oh, I bet.
Families had already made plans, football schedules were disrupted, people felt like their traditions were being messed with.
So did it work?
It backfired spectacularly.
Oh, no.
The backlash was so intense that Congress officially moved Thanksgiving back to the fourth Thursday in November in 1941, where it's remained ever since.
Don't mess with Thanksgiving.
A lesson learned the hard way.
Exactly. But it is interesting how deeply ingrained this holiday is in our culture, from those personal memories to our national identity. But, beyond the official holiday itself, there's this whole world of traditions that make Thanksgiving what it is.
You're right, those unique rituals, those special moments that really give the day its flavor. And some of those have more surprising backstories than you might think.
Okay, let's dive into that next. Welcome back, everybody. We just scratched the surface of Thanksgiving traditions in the last segment.
There's so much more to uncover.
Oh, yeah, tons of interesting stuff. And I think one of the things that people really associate with Thanksgiving is the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
It's such a spectacle.
It really is those giant balloons, the floats, the crowds. I mean, it's become like the symbol of Thanksgiving.
It's iconic.
Yeah, it really is. But how did this even get started?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that it wasn't originally a Thanksgiving parade at all.
Really?
Back in 1924, Macy's, the department store, held a parade to celebrate the expansion of its Herald Square store in New York City.
Okay.
They called it the Big Christmas Parade.
The Christmas parade.
Wow. It was meant to kick off the holiday shopping season.
So Thanksgiving wasn't even in the picture.
Not at first, no. The parade featured elaborate floats, marching bands, even live animals borrowed from the Central Park Zoo.
Oh, wow.
It was a huge hit, drew thousands of spectators, but it was the introduction of giant balloons in 1927 that really put the parade on the map.
Ah, yes, the balloons. Those are really what make it so special.
They're unforgettable, and the man behind them was a puppeteer and theatrical designer named Anthony Frederick Sarg.
Okay.
He also designed Macy's fantastical Christmas window displays, so he already had this knack for creating these eye-catching spectacles.
Yeah, he knew how to draw a crowd.
The first balloons were filled with oxygen, not helium,
Oh, wow.
and featured characters like Felix the cat, and then just all sorts of inflated animals.
So, I mean, can you imagine seeing that for the first time, those giant figures floating down the street? I mean,
It must have been magical.
so this Christmas parade eventually becomes the Thanksgiving tradition we know today.
By the 1930s, the parade was officially known as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and it had become a national event broadcast on radio across the country.
Okay.
The balloons got more elaborate, the floats more extravagant, the crowds even bigger, and then, of course, came the television era.
Right, which brought the parade into living rooms all across America.
Exactly. In 1948, it was televised for the first time and quickly became a Thanksgiving Day ritual for families all over.
Even today, it's like that one thing that everyone kind of gathers around the TV to watch at some point during the day.
It's a short experience.
It really is. And you can't forget the cultural impact. I mean, those balloons have become pop culture icons. Everyone from Mickey Mouse to Snoopy to SpongeBob SquarePants, you name it.
Yeah.
They've all had their moment floating above those crowds on Thanksgiving Day.
It's true. The parade reflects our changing tastes, our fascinations over time.
Right. It's a reminder that Thanksgiving isn't just about the past. It's about the present and how we connect through these shared traditions.
Exactly.
Speaking of traditions, let's talk about the presidential turkey pardon.
Nice.
This one always makes me chuckle. The president sparing a lucky turkey from the Thanksgiving table.
It's a lighthearted moment.
It is. When did this even become a thing?
Well, believe it or not, the official pardoning ceremony is a relatively recent addition to the Thanksgiving story.
Okay.
While presidents have been receiving turkeys as gifts for decades, the formalized pardoning tradition didn't start until George H.W. Bush in 1989. So yeah, it's not as old as you might think.
Well, it feels like it's been around forever.
But it's quickly become a beloved part of the holiday.
It really has. And, speaking of things that feel like they've been around forever, let's talk about football on Thanksgiving.
Ah, a classic.
It really is. I mean, it's practically a national pastime at this point.
You would think so, but the origins of Thanksgiving football might surprise you. The first Thanksgiving football game was actually a college match between Yale and Princeton, played all the way back in 1876,
Wow.
just 13 years after Lincoln declared Thanksgiving a national holiday.
That's even before the NFL.
Exactly.
So those Ivy Leaguers were already hitting the gridiron while the rest of the country was still figuring out how to roast a turkey.
Pretty much. And that first game sparked a trend. Thanksgiving became a popular date for college and high school football rivalries all across the country.
Makes sense.
It wasn't until the 1930s that the NFL jumped on the bandwagon, making Thanksgiving football the national phenomenon it is today.
And now we can't imagine Thanksgiving without it.
It's become a tradition in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the food.
Ah, yes. The heart of the matter.
We all know turkey's the star of the Thanksgiving show.
Yeah.
But was it even on the menu back in 1621 at that first Thanksgiving feast in Plymouth?
That's a bit of a mystery, actually. While wild turkeys were plentiful in the region, there's no direct evidence that they were served at that first gathering.
Really?
We know they had wildfowl, which could include turkey, but also duck, geese, other birds. And remember Edward Winslow's account, he mentioned deer provided by the Wampanoag and a lot of seafood, which would have been abundant in the area.
So the centerpiece of our modern Thanksgiving might not have even been part of the original feast.
It's possible, and it's a reminder that what we think we know about history isn't always the full picture.
Exactly.
Speaking of assumptions, what about some of the other classic Thanksgiving dishes? Pumpkin pie, for example, was that a staple at those early Thanksgiving tables?
I always assumed it. So, I mean, what's Thanksgiving without pumpkin pie?
Well, while pumpkins were a part of Native American cuisine, the pumpkin pie we know and love today probably didn't appear on those first Thanksgiving tables.
Oh, right.
It wasn't until the early 18th century that pumpkin pie became a common Thanksgiving dish in New England.
Interesting. So pumpkin pie is a Thanksgiving tradition, but not one that goes all the way back to the beginning.
Exactly, and the same goes for cranberry sauce, while Native Americans used cranberries for food and dye. The sweetened cranberry sauce we enjoy today likely wasn't part of that first Thanksgiving.
I didn't know that.
Remember, the Pilgrims were short on sugar by that point. It wasn't until 1912 that Marcus Uran, a cranberry grower, started canning jellied cranberry sauce, which eventually led to the creation of ocean spray.
So that quintessential Thanksgiving side dish is a relatively modern invention.
It is.
It's amazing how some of these dishes we consider so essential to Thanksgiving actually came along much later.
It's a reminder that traditions are always evolving.
They are. And speaking of modern innovations, have you ever thought about the TV dinner and its connection to Thanksgiving?
I can't say that I have.
Well, believe it or not, the TV dinner was actually born out of a Thanksgiving blunder.
Oh, really?
Back in 1953, a salesman for Swanson overestimated the demand for Thanksgiving turkeys,
Oh.
leaving the company with a surplus of frozen birds.
Oh, no.
To solve this problem, they came up with a brilliant idea of packaging the turkey with sides and selling it as a pre-prepared meal.
That's clever.
It was. And thus the TV dinner was born. A Thanksgiving mishap became a culinary innovation.
That's a great story.
It is, but you know, not all Thanksgiving stories are so lighthearted. You mentioned earlier the cranberry scare of 1959.
Ah, yes, that was a real turning point.
It was just a few weeks before Thanksgiving in 1959. The Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare announced that some cranberries grown in the Pacific Northwest might be contaminated with a weed killer that could cause cancer in rats.
Oh, wow. Right before Thanksgiving.
Talk about bad timing. People were understandably worried about their Thanksgiving plans, and cranberry sales plummeted. The cranberry industry was devastated.
That's a nightmare scenario for them.
It really was. So did they ever figure out if the cranberries were actually dangerous?
Well, the science was a bit murky. The weed killer in question, minotrezol, had been shown to cause cancer in rats when consumed in high doses, but it was unclear if the levels found in the cranberries posed a real risk to human health.
So it was a kind of a better safe than sorry situation.
Exactly.
And of course, the cranberry growers weren't happy about it. They disputed the findings and argued that the risk was minimal, but the damage was already done. Public perception had shifted, and people were hesitant to buy cranberries.
So what happened next?
Well, after further testing and a lot of public debate, the government eventually declared that most cranberries were safe to eat. But it took a while for consumer confidence to fully recover.
I can imagine.
It's amazing how one announcement can have such a ripple effect, especially when it comes to something as beloved as Thanksgiving dinner.
It's a reminder that food safety is a complex issue, and public perception plays a huge role.
It really does. But
Yeah.
you know, even with the cranberry scare, the controversies, the ever-evolving nature of Thanksgiving traditions, the holiday continues to hold a special place in our hearts.
It does, and I think that speaks to its deeper meaning.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is what keeps people coming back to Thanksgiving year after year?
Yeah.
What makes it so enduring? Welcome back to our Thanksgiving deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, everything from myth busting to cranberry scares. But I think it's time to kind of circle back to the heart of this holiday.
I agree.
What makes Thanksgiving so enduring, so meaningful? Why does this day, continue to resonate with us, even with all its complexities?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Despite all the controversies and the historical revisions and the commercialization, Thanksgiving still holds this special place in our hearts because it taps into something universal,
Huh.
something profoundly human.
And what is that?
Gratitude.
Gratitude. It seems so simple, but it's so powerful.
It really is. And Thanksgiving at its essence is a celebration of gratitude. It's about acknowledging the good things in our lives, both big and small, and expressing appreciation for what we have.
Right.
It could be the bounty of a harvest, the love of family and friends, or simply the gift of another day.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving provides this structured opportunity for us to kind of pause and reflect and recognize that abundance that surrounds us.
There's actually a growing body of research on the benefits of gratitude.
That's right.
The studies have shown that practicing gratitude can increase happiness, reduce stress, improve relationships, even enhance physical health.
It's not just a nice thing to do, it's actually good for us.
Exactly. So giving thanks isn't just, a feel-good sentiment. It's actually beneficial for our well-being.
Absolutely. And that's where Thanksgiving can be more than just a day of feasting and football.
Okay.
It can be a catalyst for a more grateful way of life.
I love that idea. Thanksgiving is a springboard for cultivating gratitude, not just on this one day, but throughout the year. But, given the complexities of the holiday's history, especially its impact on Native American communities, I think it's also a time to reflect on how we can make Thanksgiving more inclusive and meaningful for everyone.
That's a crucial point. We can't ignore the darker aspects of Thanksgiving's past. It's important to acknowledge the injustices faced by Native Americans and to honor their perspectives.
Yeah.
And as we gather with loved ones, let's be mindful of the true history of the holiday and use it as an opportunity for education and reconciliation.
I love that thought. Thanksgiving is a time to learn and reflect and connect with each other in a deeper, more meaningful way.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Thanksgiving, we leave you with this question. How can you make this holiday more meaningful, more inclusive, more reflective of the values that you hold dear?
Something to think about.
It's a question worth pondering, not just today, but every day. And from both of us, we wish you a happy, thoughtful, and gratitude-filled Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.